Okay, guys, let's fully catch up with chapter 10. I may or may not read all the verses here in these passages, but remember, you should be doing your own readings. These should not be replacing your readings. These are just meant to be supplementary, as they are just my thoughts that I have as I'm reading this, and I'm sharing these really awesome notes that my Bible has that have always been very helpful to me, so I hope that they are helpful to you. So let's dig in. So Jesus had already sent out his disciples. He had given them instructions, and now more than these disciples, now we have these 72 messengers. So he sends them out in pairs, 32 groups total. He sends them ahead to all the towns and places that Jesus planned to visit. So he's having them prepare the way for him. Kind of like John the Baptist, right? I mean, obviously it's going to be different, but you know what I mean? He's getting everybody ready to hear about Jesus and to expect his coming, to at least understand what the purpose is by then, preparing the way. He says to them, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into his fields." This is, life today, right? We got to pray for more workers. Is that us? Are we being called to go in and spread the message? Let's keep going. He warns them by telling them that he is sending them out as lambs among wolves. So he's letting them know ahead of time, look, this is not going to be easy. You're going to have a ton of opposition, and just FYI, all right? Because this is what I need you to do, and are you going to be faithful? He gives the same instructions as he did to the disciples, right? Don't bring any money with you. Don't bring any extra, pair of sandals. When you go to somebody's house, only stay at that house. Don't go from house to house. It's all the same instructions. But here is one thing that I like. So it's verse 7. Don't move around from home to home. Stay in one place, eating and drinking what they provide. Don't hesitate to accept hospitality, because those who work deserve their pay. He's saying that as they go, they deserve to be fed and taken care of. They are doing the Lord's work. It also means that whoever is the receiving side of this, be prepared to support God's people, his team that's going out into the field to plant some seeds. So he goes on to say, if the town welcomes you, eat whatever is set before you. And for the town that doesn't accept, to go ahead and shake the dust off their feet, just like he said in the last one, right? But here he adds a little bit more to it. And he says, we wipe even the dust of your town from our feet to show that we have abandoned you to your fate. And know this, the kingdom of God is near. I assure you, even wicked Sodom will be better off than such a town on Judgment Day. To reject and deny Jesus is to reject and deny God, which means you are rejecting and denying salvation. Once you know the truth and you turn your back on it, it is far worse than if you had never known. And here they had the actual Messiah. There was no more just promise from the scriptures. It was, he is now here live in living color, and you turned your back on it. And that's far worse than what Sodom and Gomorrah were attributed to as being already as wicked as they were. And if you don't know what Sodom is, Sodom and Gomorrah were towns that were destroyed by God in the Old Testament. So if you're interested, go ahead and look that up. He goes on to mention another town that was also rejecting him, Capernaum. He says, "And you people of Capernaum, will you be honored in heaven? No, you will go down to the place of the dead." Dang. Their fate was sealed. Yikes. So here is where he says kind of what I was just saying. Then he said to the disciples, "Anyone who accepts your message is also accepting me, and anyone who rejects you is rejecting me, and anyone who rejects me is rejecting God who sent me." So you see how that trickle down effect, that's what that is. So let me read some of the notes. Far more than 12 people had been following Jesus. Here Jesus designated a group of 72 to prepare a number of towns for his later visit. These disciples were not unique in their qualifications. They were not better educated, more capable, or of higher status than Jesus' other followers. What prepared them for this mission was that they had been equipped with Jesus' power and a vision to reach all the people. It is important to dedicate our skills to God's kingdom, but we must also be equipped with his power and have a clear vision of what he wants us to do. Christian service has no unemployment. God has work enough for everyone. Jesus encouraged the disciples not just to do the work, but also to pray for workers. Part of every Christian's job is to pray for new workers and to help newcomers learn the ropes. Whatever your role in God's work, pray today for more helpers. Some people, as soon as they understand the gospel, want to go convert others immediately. Jesus gave a different approach. Begin by mobilizing people to pray. And before praying for unsaved people, pray that other concerned disciples will join you in reaching out to them. God will lead you to an important responsibility, but prayer comes first. Well, you don't need me to talk about prayer because I talk about that a lot. And if this is your first video, then you really should go back and look at the other ones for the book of Luke, because I really have driven that point in. So you remember that warning about a lamb among wolves? Okay, they would have to be careful because they would surely meet with opposition. We too are sent into the world like lambs among wolves. Be alert and remember to face your enemies, not with aggression, but with love and gentleness, right? We're not trying to have them, bring down fire and whatever to cast them out. Okay. Jesus' direction to stay in one house avoided certain problems. Shifting from house to house could offend the families who first took them in. Some families might begin to compete for the disciples' presence, and some might think they weren't good enough to hear their message. If the disciples appeared not to appreciate the hospitality offered them, the town might not accept Jesus when he followed them there. In addition, by staying in one place, the disciples would not have to worry continually about getting good accommodations. They could settle down and focus on their appointed task. All those other things are just distractions. The point here is to get the people ready for Jesus. That is first and foremost what the goal is, and that's what the focus needed to be. So you remember that verse I pointed out that I liked? This is why. Jesus told his disciples to accept hospitality graciously because their work entitled them to it. Ministers of the good news deserve to be supported, and our responsibility is to make sure they have what they need. There are several ways to encourage those who serve God in his church. See that they have an adequate salary. See that they are supported emotionally. Plan special times to express appreciation for something they have done. Lift their spirits with special surprises from time to time. Our ministers deserve to know we are giving to them cheerfully and generously. I feel like there's been a stigma for a long time about if you're, just trying to share God's word, then it needs to all be free. It doesn't mean that you don't deserve a salary. It says right here, Jesus gives the example, right, that you are entitled to having what you need, and not let those things that you need be a distraction, and that should be something that is provided to you. You are entitled to that. So don't ever feel like you shouldn't be. And I'm talking to myself there too for that, by the way. So Jesus tells them to accept the hospitality without being picky and to heal the sick. So that was because of the healings, people would be willing to listen to the good news, right? Once you're in a good spot, you're able to receive the full intended message. So I mentioned Sodom. There's a note here. Sodom was an evil city that God had destroyed because of its great sinfulness. You can read this in Genesis 19. The city's name is often used to symbolize wickedness and immorality. Sodom will suffer on Judgment Day, but cities who saw the Messiah and rejected him will suffer even more. So kind of like what I was already saying. So now the 72 messengers are back. They're really excited to see Jesus and fill them in and recap on everything that's been happening. They're like, Jesus, even the demons obeyed us. And to be fair, I think we'd all be a little bit excited about that. But they, where's our heart really in that when we make statements like that? And at least for them, it wasn't in a good place. And Jesus knew that. And so he comes back at them with oh, hey, friendly reminder. I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning for this very same reason of pride. They were excited at the power side of things, and he was trying to remind them that that's not the focus. The best, your biggest glory in all of this is going to be that your name is recognized in heaven. It is in the book of life, and not that you are able to drive out demons. Because if that's what you're excited about, if that's what you're placing your value in is on that level of power, then that's the very same thing that Satan fell for. He was trying to shift their focus from being excited about power and focusing more on humility and reverence. Okay, so now Jesus is filled with the joy of the Holy Spirit, and he says, "O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, thank you for hiding these things from those who think themselves wise and clever, and for revealing them to the childlike. Yes, Father, it pleased you to do it this way." It goes on to say, "My Father has entrusted everything to me. No one truly knows the Son except the Father, and no one truly knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him." So then they were alone. He turned to the disciples and said, "Blessed are the eyes that see what you have seen. I tell you, many prophets and kings longed to see what you see, but they didn't see it. And they longed to hear what you hear, but they didn't hear it." The prophets longed to meet and know the Messiah, and they had him here live in person and living color. And so many times, time and time again, we see that they're just missing the point. They're not getting it. They can't grasp it. Let's get into the notes. It says, Jesus thanked God that spiritual truth was for everyone and not just for the elite. Many of life's rewards seem to go to the intelligent, the rich, the good looking, or the powerful, but the kingdom of God is equally available to all, regardless of position or availability or abilities. We come to Jesus not through strength or brains, but through childlike trust. Jesus is not opposed to engaging in scholarly pursuits. He is opposed to spiritual pride, which is being wise in one's own eyes. Join Jesus in thanking God that we all have equal access to Him. Trust in God's grace, not in your personal qualifications for your citizenship in the kingdom. And that's pretty cool, right? We don't have to reach some certain educational level to attain salvation. This is a free gift to anyone with ears to hear. So here's another one. The Old Testament men of God, such as David and Isaiah, made many God-inspired predictions that Jesus fulfilled. As Peter later wrote, these prophets wondered what their words meant and when they would be fulfilled. The disciples had the fantastic opportunity of being eyewitnesses to the fulfillment of those prophecies. For many months, however, they took Jesus for granted, not really listening to him or obeying him. We also have a privileged position, the legacy of 2,000 years of church history, the availability of the Bible in hundreds of languages and translations, and access to many excellent pastors and speakers. Yet often, we take these for granted. Yes, we do. Remember, with privilege comes responsibility. Because we are privileged to know so much about Christ, we must be careful to follow him. You guys, we do take it for granted. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I've definitely seen a ton of it, and I am one of those who took it for granted for a long time, supposed believer. And yeah, I did believe. Was definitely nowhere where I am today, that's for sure. But man, I had a Bible for, I don't know, probably close to 20 years, and I not once opened it up to read it, didn't bother to learn what it had to say. You know, I would hear things here and there, whether it was from people or online, and was just like, oh, okay, yeah, that must be what it means. And I never made it my own. And there are people in other countries that get persecuted. They have to hide their Bibles just to have faith and believe. And here we are like, nah, maybe read it another day. The book is too long. It's too overwhelming. I'm not going to get it. There's all these weird stories. And you know what I mean? Like, it's too bad. It's too bad that we're like that. But man, bless those who believe and truly treasure everything that comes with faith. Everything that comes with it. Everything about Jesus. Everything about the word. Everything about discipleship. All of it. I hope that they are richly blessed in their lives. Okay, so now we get into another moment where the Pharisees are trying to get Jesus wrapped up in his words, and they're asking who's your neighbor, right? Because you're supposed to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so the story is that there's a Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits, right? They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. So this guy is not well. He's like bloody, beat up, probably unconscious, and definitely cannot fend for himself. So a priest walks by and he sees a man laying there, and he just passes him by. A temple assistant or a Levite walks by, also a religious person, walks by and, keeps going. He also passes by to the other side. But then here comes a Samaritan, the one that the Jews all hate because they're half-breeds and they're dirty people and they're wicked and all the other names that they come up with. He's the one that stops. It says, when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. So he does more than stop, right? He's applying first aid. It says, then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If this bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. So Jesus says, well, which one of these was the neighbor to the guy the guy who's beat up? And so they're like, oh, well, the guy who showed mercy. And Jesus is like, yeah, go and do the same. So here's the thing, right? He didn't know anything about this guy who had been robbed. In the story, we know that it's a Jewish person who got attacked by travelers, but the Samaritan has no idea. It could have been some guy that got beat up for, I don't know, sleeping with somebody else's wife, right? And none of that's important, right? Because that's not what Jesus is not asking us to first determine if they deserve our help or are worthy of our help and assistance. And so this guy applies first aid. He also pays money to take care of him. Doesn't even think twice about it. He just does it because that's what this man needs. And he gives the money to the innkeeper, and he says if it ends up costing more, he'll pay him back when he'll make up for it when he comes back. He plans to come back. He plans to check up and see how this guy is. He plans to see this all the way through. There's a lot of reasons why everybody walked by, right? Well, I will say this about the priest that I was reading somewhere else, not here, but it was basically, if a priest touched this guy, blood, remember, was ceremonially unclean. If he was getting ready to do something in the temple, then, he would have to do the cleaning rituals all over again. And then same thing for the Levite, would have been the same thing. And so maybe that's why they didn't stop. But also that's not an excuse, because we are commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves. So let's read some of the notes here. It says, the legal expert viewed the wounded man as a topic for discussion. To the bandits, he was an object to exploit. To the priest, a problem to avoid. And to the temple assistant, an object of curiosity. Only the Samaritan treated him as a person to love. From the illustration, we learn 3 principles about loving our neighbor. 1, lack of love is often easy to justify, even though it is never right. Like, I'm sure the priest was like, oh, surely they understand, if I touch him, I'm going to be unclean. Somebody else should do that. So number 2, our neighbor is anyone of any race, creed, or social background who is in need. So it doesn't matter. A Samaritan is someone who helped the Jew, and they were, enemies. And number 3, love means acting to meet the person's need. Wherever you live, needy people are close by. There is no good reason for refusing to help. So we live in a time where it's kind of like, who's our neighbor? We don't even really talk to our literal neighbors in our neighborhood, but we talk a ton to people that are miles and miles away from us. We can talk to them every day. And so it's kind of like, well, who ends up being our neighbor here? The story of the Good Samaritan happens on a road between 2 cities. People are coming and going. The beaten man isn't close to anyone's home. He's nobody's neighbor. Everyone has somewhere else to be, yet it's out there in the middle of nowhere that the man finds his neighbor. Jesus' story shows us that being neighbors is not a matter of proximity or familiarity. The neighborhood is anywhere mercy is shown. Neighbors don't have to live nearby to be people we know. Strangers can be our neighbors. So to this legal expert, the person least likely to act correctly would be the Samaritan. In fact, he did not even say the word Samaritan to answer Jesus' question. His attitude betrayed his lack of the very thing that he had earlier said the law commanded, which is love. I did like this comment or note. For the people listening to Jesus, a neighbor would have been identified as a fellow Israelite, but for Jesus, the neighbor in this story was a Samaritan, a hated enemy of the Israelites. It's easy to put up fences around our neighborhoods. This can make for a lot of outsiders, people who don't go to our church, people who make choices we disagree with, people who don't look or act like we do, but Jesus tears down those fences and points to an outsider who shows mercy. Jesus says, mercy driven by love is the centerpiece of the neighborhood. Sometimes the edges get blurry, but Jesus gave us a clear focal point to center our lives on. So finally, we have the story of Mary and Martha. And Martha is mad because Mary's not helping her in the kitchen. Mary's just sitting down talking to Jesus. And Jesus has to be like, Martha, relax, because Mary is doing what's right. Well, I'm not saying what you're doing is not important, but I am here now, and I am basically what matters in this moment, because you're not always going to have me. So the note here says that they both loved Jesus. On this occasion, they were both serving him. But Martha thought Mary's type of serving was inferior to hers. She didn't realize that in her desire to serve, she was actually neglecting her guests. Are we so busy doing things for Jesus that we're not spending any time with him? Don't let your service become self-serving. Jesus did not blame Martha for being concerned about household chores. He was only asking her to set priorities. Service to Christ can degenerate into mere busy work that is totally devoid of devotion to God. And that's all for chapter 10. I'll see you on the next one.